97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody. Start you off with an Independence Day week here on Sports Daily. Happy to be with you the day before July 4th. It's Jacob Albrocht and Tommy Castor here. Jet Chambers producing for us, and we are entering that portion of the season. The calendar is turned to July. It's sort of a countdown until training camp, right? But we've got the trade deadline is really kind of kicked off by the Royals with the Rangers. We'll talk about the trade that they made. The first piece of what we assume will be as many as they can get out the door. A coach around here gets a big-time promotion that has interest, I think, for everybody. All kinds of good stuff. And Fred VanVleet, Tommy, gets his bag. It's a rather large one, as the free agency for Fred VanVleet is complete, just as it technically got started. How are you this morning?
I'm good. Happy early 4th of July. Good to be here on a Monday. I trust that you and Paul had a good time on Friday in my absence, but looking forward to jumping into it today.
We did. We talked a lot of college sports, as we typically do when Paul comes in, a lot of college football. We sit and we ponder, and we sit here and look at the Pac-12 as something we talk about. And, well, there is no deal. We're still waiting on the Pac-12. It's crazy. It's crazy. Tommy, you and I were at a little gathering this weekend. A little music, a little fireworks, all kinds of good stuff. Hope everybody is celebrating appropriately.
Yeah, it was a great time. We had a fun time. Good food and good music, good times hanging out with friends. And shout out to our buddy Matt for organizing everything. He did a great job, and we had a fun time.
I told you, Matt does not let people not have a good time, and he delivered again. Yeah, it was great. And it just sort of, brings back this, whenever you get like July 4th's on Tuesday, which means we're going to, as Americans, party for like 5 days, right? Like it's going to start on Saturday, and then, it's Sunday is it the July 4th weekend technically, but then the 4th isn't actually until tomorrow. So like there's today, where everybody's just sort of staggering through the day. Like, what is this day? Like, what is this random day in the middle of all these parties? Do we not work?
Like, what's happening? And like, I drove into the office today because I'm working today, and the roads were fairly quiet, fairly empty. I'm imagining that quite a few people are, sleeping off hangovers and that sort of thing from the weekend. And today, I think it's kind of nice. I know that a lot of people are working today, but I think it's kind of nice that we've got today, because people can sort of rest from the weekend and then gear up for tomorrow, right? Like it's kind of like that nice little that little break in between.
Yeah, it was getting a little like overwhelming thinking about like, God, do I have 5 nights of this in me anymore? Like, I don't know if I can go that hard for that long at this stage in my life. But we've survived it, and I've had. It has been, and you got kids, and there's naps, and it's off with the swimsuits and the sunscreen. It's a lot. Not complaining. We love it. This is a great week of the summer. We mentioned, and let's start, Tommy, with Fred VanVleet. So Fred goes and gets, we mentioned the bag. It's just a massive deal. 3 years, $130 million, about 43-ish million a year. I thought we thought it could get over 35 and to get over 40. The chatter, God, what was it, Friday, was that Fred was probably going back to Toronto, which, had us intrigued and interested because Grady Dick's there now and Marquise Noel is there now. And maybe this is the best news for Marquise Noel that could have happened. But then all of a sudden, Houston swoops in and makes a huge play at it. And I think for the Rockets, they just need some experience in there and a veteran presence, and Fred will thrive there. But at the end of the day, when somebody's making that kind of offer to you, like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and I think that this is another example from the Houston Rockets perspective, and you and I have talked about it before. Teams trying to stock up to take down Denver, right? And this is what Houston is trying to do. They've been far away from reaching that goal for a long time, and so they basically are doing what they can to try to bring in, a guy the caliber of Fred VanVleet to turn that franchise around and compete in the Western Conference. So I don't blame them for coming in hard and heavy, with a big time offer for Fred VanVleet. And you know what? At the end of the day, for Fred, he got a great offer, quite a bit of money. And the other thing I like about it, and I'll be the first to admit, I'm no expert when it comes to contracts and contract negotiations, especially in the NBA. But when I saw the terms of the deal and I saw it was a 3-year deal, Fred is 29. So you would think that this is not his last contract, right? It might be the biggest one that he gets, but it's not going to be more than likely his last contract. And so he'll play, 3 years in Houston more than likely, and then be able to renegotiate again at the age of 32 and probably get another contract and some nice money. So I liked seeing that it wasn't like a 5 or 6 year deal, that it was a 3-year deal where he's going to be able to garner quite a bit of money, that, average annual value, and then be able to go and hit the market again.
Yeah, I think so too. What will be really interesting in this is like the return on investment, or at least the perceived return on investment from the public, because what needs to happen, right, for Fred? Like, what does he need to do to make any doubters, think that this was a good deal for Houston?
Yeah.
Last year in Toronto, he scored just under 20 points a game. He was at 20 a year ago and just under 20. So basically, he's been a 20-point-a-game scorer for 3 straight years and somewhere between 6 and 7 assists in those years. So a 20-7 guy. I mean, I think that in Houston, he at least needs to be that, probably. And I think the opportunity will be there for people to say, okay, fine. Like, that's fine. And it's a pretty short deal, too. And I'm with you. It does leave the door open for another contract. I would imagine there were longer term contracts out there on the table, but we get the opportunity now to see Fred in that role. He's the guy, right? He's got the big contract. He's got all the attention. He's got the spotlight. And now, unlike Toronto, I think, and this will be what will be curious and interesting to watch, he's got the pressure, right? Now the pressure to deliver on the big contract is there with Fred. And, Fred thrives in that, always has thrived in pressure, but it's there now. And, right, like there's going to be doubters all the way through that thing, but it does make sense from Houston, if they had money, to bring in a player like Fred at that position to help the young players that they're trying to build with.
Yeah, and the last 3 years for the Rockets franchise, they've not been good. We all know that. Ever since James Harden left, they have won 14, 20, and 21 games in the last 3 seasons. So the pressure, like you mentioned, is now squarely on the shoulders of Fred VanVleet to be able to help start to turn that franchise around. It's an incredibly young roster. And this is according to Elias Sports Bureau. The Houston team, the youngest in the NBA, last season when you're weighing it by playing time. And so this brings a veteran presence and a guy that, by all accounts, and, we followed Fred VanVleet for a long time here in this area. We know that he's a strong leader, right? And that's always been, a big attribute that he brings to the table. And this is a team that is in dire need of some veteran leadership. Ime Udoka is there as the head coach. We know that he left Boston, under some not great circumstances. He's resurfaced in Houston. So with him and Fred VanVleet there as the leaders, I think that the thought process is, okay, we can start to try to turn around the fortunes of this franchise. And, I think that it's a situation that Fred VanVleet has been wanting for a while, to be the guy, to have the pressure squarely on his shoulders, not only to make the money that, he's worth. And that's amazing that he's bet on himself and he's been able to cash in on that, but to actually be the catalyst to turn around a franchise. Now we're going to see if he's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think it's a perfect spot. I sort of weave away from the public on that. I think when you consider everything that he's walking into, it is a great opportunity for the things that we know make him great. We know probably more than most of people in Toronto know it now. Could really help this young team. They drafted Amen Thompson. Again, it's a G League guy. Don't know anything about him, right? So it's a total unknown on the roster for me. He's really going to have to step in there, but that's what he does, right? He continues to quiet the critics, and boy, he's going to have an opportunity to do that now. And here we go. It's fantastic. Love it. Like, we're all in with Fred to go there, but it would have been kind of cool to see him play with Grady for a little bit.
That would have been cool. Grady, and then of course, Marquise Noel, is there, and we'll see if he can make the roster. Yeah, I mean, from an emotional point of view, that would be a lot of fun. But going back to Fred and what he can bring to the table in Houston, it shows me that the Rockets are, really wanting to try to bring in not only Van Vliet, but I don't know if you saw Dylan Brooks signed a contract with the Rockets as well. So you've got Van Vliet and Brooks paired up together. I'm not sure that right away I'm ready to say that they can contend in the Western Conference with those two guys, but I certainly think their chances are a lot better now, than they were before these two signings happened.
Yeah, look, they're going to not win a ton of games next year, I don't think. The West is a brutal grind. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think they're I mean, it's a move that's not like, okay, this is the piece that's going to get us to the postseason. It's a move that's like, this is the guy that's going to help us develop what we need to develop.
It's a start, right? It's a start to turn it around.
Right. And I don't know what their ultimate goal, you heard James Harden rumored to Houston. That doesn't make any sense, right? Bringing James Harden in there, to me, sort of inhibits the younger players. If one of these young guys steps up and all of a sudden is a star, Fred's not going to have any problem distributing and feeding that star and making him better, right? Like that's totally fine. And so that's why I get it. I totally get this. Drake's jokes aside, is Drake's the huge Raptors fan, and of course they're lookalikes, and I think that they're pretty close now, but kind of calling them the Guangdong Dragons or something, which is kind of funny. And I'm not usually I usually am quick to criticize Drake, but I thought that trash talk was kind of funny. And Fred just told him to relax. But it's good to get Fred back in the States. And so the other side of this is Marquise Noel. This is probably, Tommy, the best thing that could have happened to Marquise Noel, honestly, because Fred plays one position in the NBA, right? Point guard. That's it. Marquise Noel is going to play one position in the NBA, and that's it. Point guard. So, it does remove one potential hurdle for Marquise, who's on a two-way deal, to get there a little quicker, that's also good for Grady Dick. Those two guys know each other. I think they flew to Toronto together. I've been told their connection is not, it's the Raptors are paying attention to that. Like, that's intentional and cool. And so, hopefully as we get Fred back in the States now and down to Houston, it opens a door for Marquise Noel, who could play alongside Grady Dick. And could you imagine that storyline? These two rivals in college, coming up together with the Raptors. It'd be really cool for them too. So now we just get one more team in the NBA to pay a little attention to in Houston, and Toronto's still right there for us with Grady and Marquise.
Yeah, I think with Marquise, the biggest question mark is going to be how well does his size translate to the NBA? Because we know his playmaking ability, we know his shot.
Never been a better time.
We know
to
all
be
of that,
small
right?
in the NBA.
I totally get it, but if you're going to go, and I'm not suggesting that the Raptors are going to go all in on Marquise Noel as their starting point guard right away, right? Like, he's on a two-way deal for a reason. He's got to prove himself, to make that roster, and then even from there, I mean, it's kind of like following the path a little bit of Fred VanVleet, right? Undrafted, and then going to a team and proving yourself. The Raptors are totally used to that, but I think that if he can make that happen, and can be an actual presence on the roster for Toronto, they're going to be able to see the kind of dynamic talent that Marquise Noel is, and that he can make up for the size deficiencies. Even though, to your point, it's never been better to be small in the NBA. That's true. I think that he has got to show his explosiveness, the way that he can make shots from basically anywhere on the court, All of those attributes, that's why Toronto signed him to a two-way deal. And if he can play alongside Grady Dickey, if he can make the roster, then that's incredible. And I would love to see Noel be able to succeed in the NBA. I'm glad that Toronto gave him a shot. And now with Fred VanVleet not on the roster anymore, that potentially will at least open up a little bit of a lane for him to get into the roster.
I thought that Markquis Nowell was the most gifted passer in college basketball, at least that I saw last year. His range shone through in the NCAA tournament for sure, where people are like, what is he doing? He had that range all year. That range will translate. Yeah. That's why his size offensively, but I don't think he's going to creatively score near the basket like he did in college. That's where his size, it's where his height will take a blow because there's too many shot blockers. But what translates to me that was the best part of his game and what I enjoyed watching the most was his ability to pass. That's where he's like Fred. He's so creative as a passer that's what I think translates. And he's a good defender. So, you put him on a point guard, you put him out on the ball, he'll be fine. I think that his ability to pass the ball will translate very well. He's got to watch the turnovers at the NBA level. Certainly, he's got room to grow. He's going to have to grow, right? He's going to, and I don't mean in size. I just mean he's going to have to develop that game a little bit. Two ways, great, but there is an opportunity now for him to perhaps get to that NBA side of that a little sooner because Fred's not in his way.
And isn't that kind of the big knock on Noel is just his inability to hold on to the basketball sometimes, right?
It was late in the ball. Yeah. But I think that, he was being asked to be more aggressive there in those spots than he will be in the NBA. Nobody's going to sit there in the NBA and say, all right, Markquis, we got it. We got to have it from you. Go get us a bucket. That's not what he's going to be in the NBA. But that doesn't mean anything. It just means it's different. He's going to be a distributor. And
I want to watch in the summer league. I want to see how defenses go after him. Because of course, as we know, scouting is at, the absolute highest level in the NBA. And so I guarantee you that any team that plays him, they're going to know his propensity to turn the ball over, especially, late in the season with Kansas State. So I would imagine that we're going to see defenses attack him. And I want to see that growth. I want to see if, how he's developed in that regard, because my guess would be if Markquis Nowell doesn't make the roster for the Raptors, it will probably be because of that. Maybe that and his size. Like those would probably be the two areas that would, prevent him from making the roster. But if he can play larger than he stands, and if he can hold on to the basketball, then at that point, I think he's got a good shot to make that roster.
If teams come out on him like that aggressively, that's where his explosiveness could play through. Right. He could also take advantage of that. The summer league is going to be great this year. We've got, just gobs and gobs of names on summer league rosters to pay attention to. Grady's another one. He's got to get out there and be ready to shoot, obviously. But I think it's a good opportunity for him, too, to show people just how explosive and athletic he is, which, again, he wasn't asked to do that a ton at Kansas, but it's there. We know it's there because we saw Sunrise. And we saw what he did and what he developed into at Sunrise, where he was the human highlight reel. Doing things that you were just like, what on earth? That made him the National Player of the Year in high school basketball. Speaking of Sunrise, Luke Barnwell, not there anymore. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk Barnwell. He got a job. Shocker fans. It's not Wichita State. I know that was a pipe dream for a lot of people, but it's a big-time job and a big-time opportunity for a guy who I think is going to hit it out of the park. We'll talk about that next on Sports Daily.
Phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Wichita's #1 sports talk radio.
Forever Lawn South Central Kansas has
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Glad to be here with you. Boy, Luke Barnwell, Tommy, as we jump back in. He got the big opportunity. 10 years at Sunrise. It's hard to believe it's been that long. I don't think he's been the head coach for 10 years, but he's been there for a long time. They have reached the national spotlight. He was the coach of the year twice. all of the great players that has come through. So yeah, 8 years leading Sunrise, 178 and 28. That's just remarkable. They've been the top ranked team in the country several times. They play on national TV every year. Just an unreal run at Sunrise. And it was a matter of time. And, we'd hoped that maybe Wichita State could get him over like they did with Lindstedt back in the day. But when Texas Tech comes to call, you just wondered, like, what's the opportunity going to be? Because you don't think you'd make the jump right to head coach. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that was the best way to go to a small school or whatever. I think this is the path. Big time program, big time assistant job. I don't think it will be long. Tommy, I would say in 5 years. Here's my prediction for Luke Barnwell. Within 5 years, he will be the head coach at a major institution, like at a conference, the level of the American. I think it will be that quick, and I think it will be that big a jump for him now as a college coach.
I know that whatever program brought on Luke Barnwell, they were going to have. That's just an incredible hire, right? Like, I'm surprised that there wasn't another program that made a run at him. Maybe there were. Maybe there were other programs.
I think that there were
that had made runs at him before. And something about joining Grant McCasland's staff at Texas Tech, had to have been appealing for Luke Barnwell. But regardless, that's a great hire by Grant McCasland. Luke Barnwell is incredible, and the fact that he's won Naismith Coach of the Year, I think on 2 occasions, like back-to-back years. Developed a ton of incredible talent like Grady Dick and Ochai Agbaji and, other players. He's been a part of, helping out players like Buddy Hield over the years, and just every player that's gone through Sunrise over the last several seasons. He's had a major role in developing them and getting them ready for major college basketball and ultimately the NBA. And I think that's the appeal of Luke Barnwell. For Grant McCasland to bring him on staff, that he can help develop these players in college, and then with the goal to hopefully get them to the NBA. So congratulations to Luke Barnwell. I'm not gonna bet against your prediction that within 5 years he'll be a head coach, because that wouldn't surprise me one bit. It wouldn't surprise me if within 5 years he's a head coach at a major D1 university. He's that good of a coach, and I know that he's going to be severely missed at Sunrise, but this is a great opportunity for him.
And it's not just like, I don't say that just like as a wild and crazy guess. It was when Mark Potter came into the studio, and I don't even know what brought it up, who was his coach at Newman, was like, that's the smartest basketball mind I've ever seen, when he was a player for him. Like, the way he just saw the game, could draw it up. That comes from a track record here now. And an ethical level. Like, McCasland clearly had a goal here. McCasland, who comes from the Scott Drew tree, where you've seen Jerome Tang, and we've heard from, Paul Mills. Like, there's a very clearly defined emphasis put on character in those things. And so it's a great fit. It makes a ton of sense. Like, I totally get this. But it's just because his basketball acumen, from what I've been told, is as good as anybody's ever seen. And that stuff will translate. And the thing that will make him the most attractive is how he's been able to bring in some of the best players in the country. The Sunrise rosters have been absurd the last 3 or 4 years. Like, he's been able to get all of those guys to come in there in the post, Buddy Hield era, where you had Buddy Hield sort of as a standout for a long time. And then Barnwell comes in and just like loads them up every year with lottery picks in the NBA, basically, or first round picks. It's crazy. And colleges know that. They're going to know that. And he'll quickly earn his chops as an assistant. He's going to have, I'm sure, a learning curve here that I would imagine he'll be able to get through quickly. Something else that's cool about that Tech staff, Tommy, Matt Brower's on there. So he came, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize he came over with McCasland from North Texas. We had told that story when North Texas, I don't even, was it last year, year before, probably? It was whenever it was when they played Wichita State, because he played for the Shockers before my time, so I didn't know who he was. But that's another cool tie to this area, to Tech, right? For people around here, they'll be loaded up with, that bench of people we recognize there. So good for Barnwell, and good for Texas Tech, by the way, too, because if his recruiting does translate, that just makes this league that much better. They got the coach I think most people wanted, in the off season, right? They were able to get the one I would imagine a lot of schools were clamoring for. He, remember, sort of started a little bit of a domino effect there. And then they get this kind of assistant if they can land some of these players. I think as all the dust has settled on the mess that has been, and an unfortunate and, a mess that just sucks for those fans, when you had Beard and that situation, and then Mark Adams and that situation. It's like, come on, we've got all this momentum and we keep shooting ourselves in the foot. I don't think we're going to have any of those types of problems with this group, and hopefully they succeed there. I root for them to succeed, because I think it's a really cool basketball program.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the fact that they've got, these really, really top basketball minds on the staff. And that's really been, I think, the key for Grant McCasland at Texas Tech. I mean, think about the coaches that have coached in that program over the last couple of years, right? You had Mark Adams. That didn't really work. But you had a guy with a ton of experience. That didn't really work. Chris Beard was there for a few years. There was success there. Don't get me wrong. He's a big name coach. I feel like Texas Tech is kind of going a different direction now, where they want to fill that staff with, younger basketball, high IQ guys. Like, of course, Grant McCasland is the head coach. And now you've got Luke Barnwell on the staff, and Matt Brower's on the staff, and some guys that are, ready to rock and roll. I like this move. I like the new regime at Texas Tech a lot. It's significantly different than what the Red Raiders had before. And so I think it's the right opportunity for Luke Barnwell.
Not that Beards was Beards was not expected. Like, he didn't have some track record behaviorally, nor did Mark Adams, quite frankly. Like, those were, Beard at the time, and still is by many, considered very high character. I mean, whatever happened in that situation, and it's a mess, and, they've had charges. I don't know. But before that, generally speaking, he was also in this mold. And, Mark Adams didn't have that I know of any sort of, so that's what I mean about, like, unfortunate. It's one thing when you hire Bobby Knight and you find yourself in trouble because he loses his temper. You kind of knew that was coming, right?
Right.
Like, Tech, who has developed this great program and put these great facilities in and all of this stuff, it just, like, these things keep happening with their staff. So I'm glad for this reset. I think it's a good group. I'm glad for Barnwell. Again, 5 years, mark it down. July 3rd, Jad, 5 years. He'll be the head coach of a, what do we call the, what do we do? Is it group of five? I don't know. Cause I don't know if it'll be like a power five, which is possible, but probably not that likely, but it'll be, a school in the, at the line of, like,
a D1 level.
State.
A D1 level.
Well, but bigger than D1. Like, I don't think he's going to end up at, like Texas A&M Corpus Christi. I don't think that's what he's taking, right? I think it'll be it's not mid-major anymore. So whatever it's called, right? Like, whatever, like a league like the American or the Mountain West, or like a big-time league that may not quite be Power 5 yet, but don't count that out either, because, again, from what I'm always told about him, it's just very apparent very quickly how great a basketball mind he has and is. So congratulations to Luke Barnwell. Sunrise will be just fine, I'm certain. And we'll follow Barnwell now. We'll follow that career. I'm very, very curious about it. 869-1240 is the number to call if you want to get in touch with the program. Hey, reminder, Odyssey's teaming with the city of Wichita, the Wichita Parks Foundation, Riverfront Stadium, and the Wichita Wind Surge to bring you Red, White, and Boom. July 4th at Riverfront Stadium. Entry is free. Gates open at 6. Riverfront's concessions will be open, plus enjoy the food trucks on the Hyatt lawn. Watch the Surge play in Tulsa on the Jumbotron, and then you can stay for those fireworks. So, again, that's coming up tomorrow. IHOP hotline is open, 869-1240. We'll take a peek at the rest of the NBA free agency slash, latest, Austin Reeves takes a deal that most people think he could have made a lot more money. So that's a curious move. Dame Lillard now looks like he'll finally be out. So we'll take a look at all that. We'll get you ready. Royals fans, we're holding it for hour number 2, but we definitely want to talk about, Salvador Perez, the All-Star, the trade deadline. They make their first move. It's all coming. Sports Daily, Albrecht and Caster. We'll be right back. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 coming to Boulevard Theaters in Wichita. You can check it out a day early. We're giving away a pair of tickets for a special screening on Thursday, July 13th at 7 o'clock. That's Boulevard Theaters at Town West. We'll give that pair of tickets for the early screening away right now to our first caller, 869-1240. Another Mission Impossible. I mean, like, zero chance that's not entertaining, right, Tommy? Like, at those points, you just chalk them up. Yeah, you're just like, all right, well, this is going to be good. I don't even remember the last one I saw. I know I haven't seen all of them, but every time I tune one in, I'm like, yeah, that was good. That was just what I needed right there in that moment. Little blow it up action movie. Never misses. All right, welcome back into Sports Daily. Salvador Perez is the all-star for the Royals, Tommy. It's going to be the Shohei Ohtani show at the All-Star game. Count on it. Also, maybe a little Ronald Acuna Jr. What Shohei's doing, when we talk about this all the time, like, he's not far off of the pace, by the way, that Aaron Judge was on last year to set the home run record. Totally within reason that is a possibility here. But Shohei will get in there. I don't think that he'll pitch. He's made it, I think, as a hitter and a pitcher. We saw him. Did we see him pitch in his last All-Star game? We did, didn't we? I don't remember.
I believe so. That's a lot's happened since then. I don't have 100% memory on that, but I think he did.
So he's there, and you get Salvador Perez as your rep for the Royals. I think that's just about right. I don't know who else it would be, honestly, especially now with the Aroldis Chapman traded. I mean, I guess he would have been the other candidate. You probably could have been moderately close to making a case, I think, for Bobby Witt Jr. And as we say that, I'm going to look at Bo Bichette, who is the all-star reserve at shortstop. I just want to put their numbers together, and let's see kind of how close Bobby Witt Jr. might have been. It's probably closer than people think, but I could be wrong about that. So let's take a look. So Bobby Witt Jr., 249. Where are we at here? 42 RBIs. I'm going to pull these up. Tommy, give me like 5 seconds here. You good with Salvador Perez?
I mean, I am. I don't think that there's another option, really. I wouldn't have been on board with Bobby Witt Jr. I mean, I think that he will be an all-star in his career. I think that's going to happen. Maybe as soon as next season. But I think that with the way that the Royals season has gone, there's one guy you can point to. And I think this is where, as the rosters are being put together, when you get the teams that are only going to have one representative and the league picks who those players are, it just makes sense for it to be Salvi.
Well, yeah, it's not Bobby Witt Jr. this year. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Bo Bichette's hitting 317 with 15 home runs. He doesn't steal many bases. Bobby Witt Jr.'s at 12 home runs. Pretty similar RBI. I think, yeah, they're within 10 of each other in RBI, and Bobby Witt Jr., of course, has the stolen bases, 23, that adds to his. So, he would have had to go in over Bo Bichette, essentially, and those reserves are a little bit different, so you can't really make that case. But Whit Merrifield's in there, Tommy, which is interesting after, just an awful year a year ago. Whit Merrifield, and I didn't even realize that until I just saw that and said that out loud, that Whit Merrifield is an all-star. Thanks, Blue Jay fans. Had you seen that? Had you seen that before I just said that?
Yeah, and I mean, he is having, let's give him some credit. He's having a better year this year than he did last season, right? But I don't know. There are a couple of those on each roster. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm a Braves fan, and Orlando Arcia is the starting shortstop for the National League. And I mean, Orlando Arcia is fine. He's a good shortstop, but there were questions about whether or not he'd even make the opening day roster for the Braves. And he's the starting shortstop. So there's a couple of weird ones.
OPS than Bobby Witt Jr., and Bobby Witt Jr. is getting hammered for that.
Yeah, there's a couple of weird ones on each roster.
Come on now. I did not know Whit Merrifield was an all-star until we started this conversation 3 minutes ago. Wow.
I mean, I also saw that I think, and we can talk about it more next hour, but Michael Lorenzen for the Tigers is their rep. And I looked at his stats, and he's like 2-6 with like a 5 ERA. You know, it's like one of
Well,
those things
when you
where
have
you've got
to have a rep, though, like
right.
if you
Yeah,
have
you
to have
got to
somebody,
grab somebody. Right. Yeah.
that's a little bit different. But you've got Wander Franco's not an all-star, whatever. The Rangers have like basically the entire infield, the entire lineup. It seems like it's wild, the all-star game. But anyway, like that took us off the rails there because Salvador Perez is the rep, and those are the reasons what we just talked about, like sort of the silliness of it that makes Salvador Perez make the most sense. Salvador Perez to me is the type of player, and again, I know that we cover them, but just like from a baseball standpoint, he's the kind of player where it's never going to bother me when he's in an all-star game because he always steps up to that thing. He's as fun a character as there is in baseball, and he's been underrated for a guy that very well could end up in the Hall of Fame. And again, it's going to highlight a little bit about his trade value, Tommy, as we look at it and we're watching that game. Like, here's Salvador Perez.
Yep.
I kind of get that. I've been getting this feel. I think they're going to trade him.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. I mean, it's going to end up being a fire sale, right? We've known that for a while. We've discussed the potential players that are, on the market. And I think that if you're not going to trade Salvi right now, then you're not going to trade him at all because the value, if you wait another year or another 2 years or however long, the value will continue to decline. The return on what you get back will continue to diminish. So again, as we've discussed before, there certainly is an emotional pull to keep Salvi on that roster his entire career. But with things as bad as they are, and you know what, again, by the way, for things as bad as they are, they did take 2 out of 3 at home from the Dodgers over the weekend, which is wild. I mean, I would have never thought that. But regardless, they're still so far out of it that you got to try to get some value where you can in return for Salvi.
Well, and this is where it will come down to John Sherman. Like John Sherman wants to talk about all this stuff. Are you willing to eat a lot of that contract and get the most return for Salvi that you can get? Because this is a big put up or shut up moment to me for John Sherman. If they trade Salvador Perez, how much contract are they willing to eat? Because that will enhance the return they get back. If it's 0 and they get a light return for it, then miss me with all the, talk about getting better and that's our top priority and all that garbage. Because if you really want to, you're going to have to eat some of this money. That's where you can spend. You want to know where you can show the dollars? Maybe the free agents haven't been there to spend on, and I agree with that, quite frankly. This is the opportunity you have as an owner to show this fan base, look, we're willing to eat some of that money. This is a move we didn't want to make. We hate that we're making it because who would ever want to trade this guy? But we're going to make it. And we're going to make it in the best possible way that we can. We're going to eat some money, and we're going to get a big-time prospect back in return. That's where he can step up as the owner and show the fans that he's committed to winning and not just, getting the drawings for a new stadium.
I think that's fair. I mean, we're at a point now where you've got to throw out the emotions and really look at it pragmatically. And, and I know that we're going to get into the Aroldis Chapman trade. It makes sense. It really genuinely does. I was a little bit surprised how early the trade came. I thought it might be a little bit closer to the deadline, but the Royals are clearly wanting to be active right away. And I don't know, like, I don't know how much of that trade and how much of the moves that we're going to be seeing right now, it's, pressure being put on the front office to let's actually show that we're actually willing to make some moves right away. But that's kind of the feeling that I got when Chapman got traded. I'll feel the same way if Salvi gets traded.
We're gonna talk about the Chapman trade and moving forward as we go into the next hour, because the reviews on that trade have been interesting, I think, in the return and everything else. And I'm a Rangers fan, so maybe I bring a little bit of different perspective to that. So gear up for that, Royals fans. The IHOP hotline will be open 869-1240. So let's get that ready to go. And at this point, what are you ready for? Are you ready for everybody to go, or they're pieces you want to hang on to. It's something we've been talking about, and they did. They moved fast on that one. Now it's like, do they move fast on all the other ones? Or was that more of a Rangers are desperate? Because, by the way, they are. Their bullpen is hot garbage, as proved twice in that weekend series against the Astros. But there's that. So that IHOP hotline's open. Congratulations to Zach, who won our Mission Impossible movie tickets. Let's give away something else here. Let's give away a free iced tea and a free Brewhouse coffee drink from HTO, 2 locations in Wichita. Let's give those away too as we go into our hour number 1 break. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll get us a couple winners there. Chad will take care of that for our first caller. We'll come back. Royals, trades, Chapman's out. Who else is next? We'll talk about it on Sports Daily in hour number 2.
is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It is Sports Daily. It is hour number 2. Glad to be with you here. Jake Ballbrock, Tommy Castor. Congratulations to Sally, who won a little HTO there as we went to break. A little tea, a little coffee. Glad to provide that for Sally. Zach was a winner in that last hour as well for some movie tickets. Always love doing that for everybody here. I'm Jake Ballbrock alongside Tommy Castor. We are making our way through this Monday. We'll be off tomorrow for 4th of July. I'm going to be back with you on Wednesday. Tommy, the Royals make the first move. Aroldis Chapman, really the first move of the Major League Baseball trading season. So I think the initial reaction to the Chapman deal was somewhat negative. Cole Reagans, who is now 25 and has a 5.32 ERA this year, but was the Rangers minor league pitcher of the year last year. So I didn't mind that. I think he's got, a pretty decent chance to reach and look, 592. That's what he's done at the big league level, right? He's started in 9 games. It hasn't gone great as a starter, but he's a minor league pitcher of the year. He's got a decent track record. He's right there. I think he's fine. I think it's a pretty good return because once if you get out of his big league career and go look at his minor league career, that's probably the type of prospect you would hope to get. And the other name I don't know anything about, but is relatively interesting, is Ronnie Cabrera, a 17-year-old in the Dominican Summer League, who I think is, by all accounts, very toolsy and is putting up good numbers as a 17-year-old in that league. So who knows? Chapman was having a good year, and the moving was hot, and I'm not sure that the return could have been any better or worse had they waited, but why wait? If you like Cole Reagans as the pitcher, you go make the deal.
Yeah, this is the epitome of a trade deadline or month of July, acquisition and transaction for both of these teams. Like, this is the, typically the textbook reason why two teams make a trade. You've got the Rangers on one hand, and they're pushing to win their division and to go to the playoffs and be a contender, and their bullpen is not good. And so they try to bring in a veteran like Aroldis Chapman who can make a difference down the stretch for them. Happens all the time. Then on the Royals' point of view, and from their perspective, they've got a reliever that has, by all accounts, been pretty solid for the most part this year for them, and one of the few bright spots on the entire roster. And they need to rebuild their farm system. And so they bring in some more young pitching and, definitely an organization where the farm system has been depleted over the years. And so they get some resources for the future. So I think this trade makes sense overall. I'm not sure why anybody would be negative about it on either side. I get it for the Rangers and I get it for the Royals.
Well, I think that there are people on the Royals side certainly that feel like they could have gotten more for Aroldis Chapman, but he's been on the decline in his career. He's got some baggage. I think there's definitely a strike while the iron's hot. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a nice piece for Texas, but Reagans he was really good last year, all the way up to AAA. He made it 3 different levels. He's not, it's been a little rocky for him at the big league level. I don't know what he ultimately is. If he's a starter, it's going to be a back end of the rotation, probably more likely a reliever that could be a piece that helps you at some point. And you got, an intriguing young player that, as you look down the road at this trade, is probably the guy that, you're centering, I would imagine, in on to see if this could become a 17-year-old who's putting up good numbers right now in a league as a 17. That's probably where you're like, okay, well, this is the piece. But I think Reagans could be handy. I mean, the Rangers were trying to use him this year. Wasn't working. I don't think there will be that type of pressure on him with the Royals, but that's the first move. And, you kind of need to get that. If the Royals making moves, it's who can we at least run out there respectably at the big league level, and how do we retool the farm system? I think that's probably a pretty fair little path to how they're going to handle these deals moving forward. Now the big question becomes, who can you trade, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would imagine that Scott Barlow, well, I don't know, man. Does Scott Barlow have any more or less trade value than Aroldis Chapman? It's probably about the same.
I think he's got a little bit less, but still there's value there. We talked about it last week. Teams that are in the hunt that have really bad bullpens, they're willing to, I think, probably take a swing at a guy like Scott Barlow, even though his month of June was not very good. He's got the stuff. He's got the pedigree, I think, to be a solid bullpen piece for a contender. And some of it, by the way, I don't know if you can, pin all of it on the shoulders of Scott Barlow. He's playing for a really bad team that a lot of times,
right.
I don't have the stats in front of me, but a lot of times they're not giving him a ton of run support, late in the game, or he's coming in and losing situations or whatever, so I think that he could be a solid bullpen piece for a team down the stretch as they try to make the playoffs.
He was really good in 21, really good in 22. For whatever reason, they didn't trade him. Doesn't make any sense to anybody. And then now they trade him. He won't have the value he did. But I do think that there are teams that will, look and see like, okay, this guy has been a good piece. He's not going to come in and be anybody's closer. He probably shouldn't have been a closer in he just played for the Royals. But, he knows what he's doing. For teams that are just looking for like the Rangers, I wondered if they would make a play for both of those guys at once, because there are a lot of teams that just need help in general. Like you're not looking to bring in a closer, right? You're just looking for arms you can throw out there that you can have some confidence in. And I think Scott Barlow fits that mold. Now, what does he return in a trade? I mean, probably not anything that's going to blow the doors off of anything either. It'll be like this. It's one of those where if you're the Royals, maybe you do look to the young prospect that's not even like that. Just like this Ronny Cabrera guy, some 17-year-old, some very young down the road, like not somebody people are going to recognize now, but that, scouts pretty well and that kind of a thing. Okay. So after Barlow, then we think they'll probably listen closely and be relatively active with Salvador Perez. His will be very complicated because of his contract. We've talked about Bobby Witt Jr. forever, right? Like whether that should be a thing. And I still contend absolutely not until he has his ultimate, peak value, which is not right now, but could be as soon as this offseason or next year. That's about it, Tommy. Like, I don't know. I don't look up and down and see a lot of interesting players that teams are going to want. I just don't.
I think that there are intriguing options, some players that I think, they're not going to be superstars for teams in need, but could be solid bench pieces. Or, I mean, think of when the Royals made their World Series runs, right? Like they went out and acquired a handful of players that I don't know if anybody would say guys like, Ben Zobrist or Johnny Cueto were superstars by any means, but they were
Cueto
solid.
Zobrist, they probably
was he though?
They were both.
You want to call both
good,
of them?
Yeah.
You want to call them superstars though? I mean, I think that they were both solid players,
superstars.
But I don't think I don't think they were.
What solid
that's what I said. Like, neither one of them.
The Royals have though.
That's what I said though. Neither one of them were superstars. They were both solid foundational pieces that helped the Royals get over the hump. I think that there are a couple of players on this roster that right now could be that, for teams that are looking to be contenders. And it might be Scott Barlow. It definitely was Aroldis Chapman. Honestly, it might be Salvador Perez. I would even look at maybe somebody like a Nicky Lopez. He's not going to be a superstar for a team, but he can go in and, contribute, with the attributes he has, to help be another piece to help get a team over the hump.
Boy, Ben Zobrist and Johnny Cueto were both really good and were two of the top targets at that trade deadline. I'm not
saying they weren't good.
I don't think the Royals have anybody that's good. Like, who's good? Who's good? Who are you going to trade? I mean, there's like Nick Prado. He's hitting 250. Like, I don't know what you're going to get. I really, like, honestly, I'm not trying to dog on these players,
how much of
reality?
How much of the the stat lines of the players, the young guys on this team are, you know, their own lack of hitting or whatever it is, and or more of the fact that the team is just garbage, and like there's no support around any of these guys. Like it's almost like every single one of these players, like they're the sum of all parts, right? Like none of them are working well together whatsoever. And it makes me wonder if you start to split some of them up, like Nick Prado, for example, could you see him have more success on a team that is, structured better, or that, they're winning more games? I don't know. I think it's an intriguing possibility. And I think that that's what teams are going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for some of these players that, like, think of Scott Barlow, for example. The stuff is there. The results haven't been there recently for the Royals, but the stuff is there where it makes them intriguing to go to a contender. I think there are some hitters that it's kind of the same way. And I don't know how many of these players are ultimately going to be moved from Kansas City, but I think there's value in most of them. It might not be incredible value, but I think there is some value for most of them.
Yeah, but if there's not value for a guy like Prado, he's young. Like, if you don't get the appropriate value back, there's no need to trade him. Carlos Hernandez is a guy I think that could move. He's gotten better. He's been better lately. I think they brought in Amir Garrett with the hope that they could trade him. His is interesting because, like, he's not allowing the runs necessarily, but his whip is bad, man. He's allowing base runners. So I don't know, how much, but he's not allowing runs. He hadn't allowed a run in 6 appearances. So maybe he's got some value. I think that's where it's going to be. I think it's going to be any bullpen pieces. Does, like, Brad Keller, what's his status? I don't even know where he's at in his recovery, but
I think there's some value for Brady Singer potentially.
Ooh,
I think there might be a little bit of value for Daniel Lynch. Both of these guys,
maybe. Singer's been he was good in his last start, but
yeah,
he's been good in his last
really
two
good
starts,
in his. Yeah, I mean they're starting to trend up a little bit. I mean, like, if you're looking for some bright spots in the rotation, it's been Singer and Lynch over the last, I don't know, 2 weeks or so.
Well, I mean, let's be fair too. Like, those 2 really good starts for Singer brought his ERA all the way down to 5.52.
It's not great. Really bad start to the year. But again, like,
I know.
I want to focus in on this, like, for a second, because we can dissect their stats left and right, and their ERA and their whip and all of that. It's the same thing with Scott Barlow. If the attributes are there, don't you think that there are at least some teams that can look at these guys and say, we can develop them better than the Royals can?
The difference between Scott Barlow and Brady Singer is Scott Barlow's 30. So he's not. Brady Singer's 26. Like, if there's upside to Brady Singer, it's like you don't want to trade young guys on the bottom dollar. That's what's so hard. Like, if Brady,
so you hang on to Brady Singer and let him languish for another couple of years in the Royals system.
Well, if he's not going to bring you, if he brings you legitimately nothing back in a trade, which is very possible, then yes, I would probably rather see if he can ever figure it out consistently. Because just watch, like, they trade these guys and then they go have success, and it's like, what the hell? Like, we had these guys for 4 years,
but you couldn't develop them. You couldn't make them successful. That's been the biggest knock with this franchise for so long, is that they can't develop their talent that they have used high draft picks on. And so because of that, they're not getting nearly the amount of value that they should on the trade market. And then, so I would almost rather, like, a guy like Brady Singer, you try to get what you can out of him. If that's a couple of minor leaguers that aren't, highly touted, but maybe, I don't know, you can do something with him. I'd almost rather do that than just let him continue posting a 5.5 ERA.
I don't think that trade value's there. I mean, I think the trade return would be so bad that it would not be worth the time, is, I guess, what I'm saying. Like, again, there has to be, and it's the same concept as Bobby Witt Jr. at a different level at this point. But when you have a young player, you don't want to trade your young players at rock bottom. Like, maybe look, maybe Brady Singer, because there's time, has 2 or 3 more good starts in a row, and then you're looking at like, hey guys, you got 5 good starts in a row, and then you can get some trade value there. But it's the same concept as Bobby Witt Jr. Why not, instead of trading him for essentially nothing, just to say you're making trades? Why not, if he continues it, trade him in the offseason, right? Like, I don't think there's much good you're doing if you're trading younger players. Scott Barlow's 30 and his contract's going to expire. Like, he's irrelevant. Brady Singer and Nick Pratto and Bobby Witt Jr., like, no, they're not. Well, excluding Bobby Witt Jr., because I think he's fine. Some of these other guys have not developed the way you want them to, but that still doesn't mean it's in the Royals' best interest to get nothing for them. If they can string it together, if they can finish strong, whatever it is, then you have better trade value either this offseason or next offseason. That's better for your rebuild than to get nothing essentially for them if you go and trade them because some team gets a discount. Yeah, look, we think we can develop this toolsy young player better than you can, but we're not going to give you anything for him. Like, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. And the other part of it is the Royals do have to field a roster here. Like, they do have to run something out there the next couple of years.
Who is that going to be?
Right.
Right.
Why?
I mean, who's that going to be?
Why not let it? I understand, but why not let it be somebody who can at least increase their trade value for you? Right. I just don't the idea of trading on the bottom dollar, like giving.
And I don't like the idea. I don't like the idea of seeing if these guys can increase their trade value when literally none of them have been able to do that. So
you're just saying another team is interested in them, though, because they can do that.
What I'm saying is that if you can move them out now and start over, even if the return isn't great, it's better than letting them languish. They're not increasing. You think Brady Singer magically from this year to next is going to be a better pitcher and is going to increase his trade value? I'm not sure that's the case because we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that from any of these guys. So
well, we have seen it from Singer. We have seen it from Singer over his career. He's had stretches.
He's regressed big time this season. I guess if that's the case, I just think that you just got to do what you can to get whatever the return is, even if it's not great, and move on, and start over.
So last year I warned, and this was before you got on, everyone's like, oh, trade, like get all these young players. We got to call up all these great young players. And I'm like, guys, they're in AAA for a reason. If you call up all these young players, like, you need to let some of these old vets, right, play so that they can increase their trade value. And that's what they did. And it was like, no, why are we wasting our time? Why are we waiting? We got to get these young guys up. Well, this year is why, because they're not big league caliber players. Okay, they're in AAA for a reason, a lot of them. So you get your wish, all the young players come up, and guess what? In baseball, it's really, really difficult to take that last step into the big leagues. So you've had that wish now to get all these young players up there. They're not any good, which of course they're not. That doesn't mean they can't be better. And just like in business, in life, not maximizing the value on a deal makes no sense. So if somebody comes in and blows him away for Brady Singer, that's great. But don't just trade him because you feel like you have to trade him. He's 26. You don't have to trade him yet. He has controllable years. If he's not going to bring you anything anyway, and there's nobody he's blocking, by the way, he's not blocking anybody, then why not see if his value can increase? Because it's not going to get worse. His value won't get worse.
Honestly, right now, do you think the Kansas City Royals franchise is in any position to have leverage here? Do they have any leverage at all?
I don't think they have any leverage. That's why you don't
whatsoever.
So don't trade when you have no leverage.
But when are they going to have leverage? And there is no indication that they will anytime soon. So get what you can out of these guys and move on. But I don't want to keep this roster around that it's not working. It hasn't worked and it's not going to work. Why continue to bang your head against the wall? Just move on from as many of these guys as you can. You'd be totally
satisfied if they trade everybody and the replacement value players are are worse. You don't you don't have to trade just to trade. You trade if the value's good. You trade Scott Barlow, who's expiring anyway, who you're like the options for Scott Barlow are nothing or something. We're not there yet with some of these younger players for the Royals. Like it's not,
okay.
It's
so
not.
We'll just we'll have them trot out the same basically roster next season and the season after that and the season after that, and just cross our fingers and hope that some of them will develop to a point to where you can trade them away. I guess that's the strategy to turn things around for the Royals.
But so what's your alternative to that?
The alternative is to move on from all of them and at least
replace them with what? And replace them with what?
Work in free agency. Have a commitment to try to spend some money, to get some players in that can, maybe help bridge that gap a little bit as you rebuild the farm system. Like there are things that you can do so you're not trotting out the same tired roster that just, they don't win ball games. They don't work. It doesn't work well. So get what you can out of the guys that are clearly not working for your franchise and start to, put some pieces in place to turn it around long-term. I'd rather them do that than trot out the same roster next season and the season after that and cross our fingers and hope they can get trade value 2 or 3 years from now. That's ridiculous.
The point is, no, it's not ridiculous because Brady Singer's trade value with 4 more years of control, 4.5 is at its it cannot get lower than it is right now. So why would you trade a player who you drafted that high, who has shown you glimpses, who has 4.5 years of control? Why would you give somebody a discount on him?
Because he has an ERA of 5.5 this season.
You just said he looks good the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so you can get some value out of him.
If there's value out of those 2 starts and a team will give you a good I'm all for trading him if there's a good return. My fear is there's not a good return. And if there's not a good return, you don't just trade him to trade him unless you're getting something back. Daniel Lynch, exact same scenario. The one thing about those young players and the reason that they basically made all the holistic changes in the organization was to help these players. Now, it hasn't worked, but if there's value and somebody's willing to make you a decent offer, of course you listen to it. I don't think that there is right now. And with 4.5 years of control, when most players in Major League Baseball hit a prime at about 26, 27 years old, instead of trading them for nothing, right? They're not costing you any money. They don't make a bunch of money yet. Like, it doesn't make sense to me ever to trade at low value. The problem when you had Scott Barlow was they didn't trade him when he had high value. They waited until he was an expiring contract, when he was at his peak and had good trade value. They're at the exact opposite end of that with some of these young players that people are saying blow it all up. But the problem with blowing it all up is the same problem with calling up all the young players last year. There's nothing that says doing that is going to help you get better in the short term. In fact, it won't help you get better in the short term.
100%. And I have no preconceived notion that by them making moves and moving these young players, if they do that they'll be better in the short term. They won't be. They'll be worse. Like, it'll be bad. It already is bad.
Try to make yourself better in the long term.
Because who cares about the short term right now? How is keeping guys that they're clearly not going to develop and be successful in your system, how is that making you better in the long term? How? Because I don't see how it is.
If they increase their trade value from 0,
but they're not going to
0.
They're not. Show me a player that has in this Royal system over the last 3 or 4 years increased their trade value. Because I can't think of one.
Barlow before this year. I don't know.
I feel like you're clinging on to this hope that if you keep these players, that they're eventually going to figure it out and get you a good amount of value in return.
I'm not doing that.
And they're not going to.
I'm not doing that at all. I'm clinging to the fact that you don't in business give away. Like, if you don't, you don't trade at the bottom dollar.
But the Royals don't have the luxury to dictate that at this point in their franchise. They don't.
What's the alternative?
Move them out and start over now instead
With
of pushing
what,
this out
though?
2 or 3
Like,
years from now.
start over is easy to say, but what are you starting over with?
I just said that free agency, and you go and you try to bring in, spend some money on some players that can help you in the short term while you figure out your farm system in the long
Like
term.
Jackie Bradley Jr., because that's what they can
No,
afford right now.
Not Jackie.
So
Bradley.
what
No.
free agent? Like what free agent
They
would the
can
Royals
afford?
bring
They
in?
can afford. They can afford
Jordan
more than that.
Lyles? Bring
No,
in
they
Jordan
can afford-
Lyles?
They can afford better than that. John Sherman's got to open up the pocketbook.
For
Bottom
one
line.
pitcher? Like they're not in that position. That's not reality. We'll continue the conversation. 869-1240. It's Albrecht and Castor, where the Royals got us on the trade deadline a little earlier than normal. They do trade Aroldis Chapman, which was a no-brainer for everybody. What about these other young players? That's where we are now. More right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. Saul Brockton Caster with you here. Talking Royals, trade deadline. Royals got the ball rolling with Aroldis Chapman. All right, so JB, as Tommy just pulled up his comment here, blow the entire thing up. They kind of did that. Now I don't like the promotions either, and he doesn't like Piccolo. It doesn't make sense. I get it. I'm sort of with you on that too. It's just the issue for me, Tommy, is, and you asked me to bring up a couple of names who were late bloomers, right, in the Royals organization. So when I first moved here, I came toward the end of Mike Moustakas. Mike Moustakas is a perfect example. Everyone wanted Moustakas out of there when he was having terrible years, batting 230, 212, right? He seemed to be regressing, 22, 23, 24. All of a sudden, 26, he's an all-star. And then he's an all-star two times total there. Sets at the time a home run record. Late bloomer. They had every opportunity to trade him for nothing when he was batting 212 because the fans were frustrated with him when he was 23 years old, right? That's a perfect example of why would you trade him for nothing when he's under control?
It's not a perfect example because I'm not willing to look back on the players that were part of the championship run as far as reference points. Like, show me a player right now in the last 5 or 6 years.
Why are you not willing to look back at those players?
Because this is a completely different organization now than it was 7, 8, 9 years ago.
I mean, it's not.
I mean, it kind of is. Like the quality and the caliber of players and the way that they are developed is different, right?
But it was the same people developing and drafting those players. Dayton Moore drafted both of those guys and developed.
Dayton Moore's not with the organization anymore. I mean,
but he drafted Brady Singer. I don't understand. Like, it literally is the same person.
My point is that if you want to actually give me an example of somebody from, I don't know, 2016 or 2017 to now that has actually increased their trade value by being a member of the franchise, then I'll listen to that. But I don't think that there has been. Like, unless I'm missing somebody, have there been players that have been a part of this organization
you're missing
while they've
point.
been so bad where they've actually improved their trade value? I don't think that there is.
You're missing my point. People were ready to run Mike Moustakas out of town when he was a young player with some upside who wasn't reaching his potential yet. They would have got nothing for Mike Moustakas. Here's another one, and this is a little bit different, but somewhat similar. Luke Hochevar, who does not have a great place in Royals history, right? You know, he eventually turned into a pretty handy player to some pretty critical times for that organization. They had every opportunity to go trade him when his ERA was 6.55 when he was 25 years old. Now, my point is, I'm not saying don't trade guys that have value. If they have value, trade them. I'm fine with that. But those guys that don't have value, that have pedigrees and lots of years of control, what's the point of trading them when they have their absolute lowest value? It cannot get lower than this.
And what's the point of letting them hang around where we know they're not going to develop into anything?
They're not going to 4.5 years of control.
But they're not going to do anything.
Do you think a lot of people said the same thing about Mike Moustakas? When he was 20?
That they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure that
that would have been a mistake at the time.
But they also weren't in free fall at that time like they were then.
They were pretty bad. They were pretty bad in what year was that? 2012.
2012, but 2013, 2014, whatever, they are starting to put the pieces together and they're closer. I mean, like, I go back to the couple of years before the World Series runs. So what would that have been? 2012, 2013, where, yeah, they weren't great, but you could start to feel like, okay, there are some pieces here where they're closer than we think that they are. They're nowhere near that right now. It's a completely different organization now than it was in 2012, 2013, where you could feel like, okay, there are some young players here where it's starting to move in the right direction. There is no indication outside of Bobby Witt Jr. and maybe Vinny Pasquantino that there's any value with these young players whatsoever. So I guess if you want to hang on to them, to just let them suffer in the organization and not do anything of importance or significance in the next couple of years, I guess be my guest. But I guarantee you, nobody's going to hang around for that and want to watch that.
Well, nobody's going to watch a losing team anyway. I just have no interest in not maximizing trade value. Let's go to the phone lines. Brian, 869-1240. Welcome into the IHOP hotline. Welcome into Sports Daily. What's up, Brian?
Hey, morning, fellas. Jacob, I'm right there with you. You can't trade some of these young guys now. I mean, the whole organization is junk. It would be different if the minor league system was good and you had hope. But guys, there's not. They're terrible. I don't know how you get much worse than this. And in my opinion, the only way some of these young guys, Brady Singer, the Daniel Lynch, the only way these guys get good, other than coaching, and obviously the team has not had that in a few years, in my opinion, you got to surround them with some veterans that are good and know how to be good major league players. John Sherman's definitely not going to do that. So if you start trading these young guys now that has, any ounce of potential, the Royals as an organization is going to look more desperate than they are right now. And I will fashion it to this. I'll use this example that shows my seasoning. Back when I was a kid, it was when the baseball card phase was huge, right? So I got my brother to trade me a Ken Griffey rookie card for a freaking Butterfinger. That's what's going to happen. If the Royals trade some of these young arms, there's your potential Ken Griffey Jr., obviously more, later in their careers. But what are they going to get back for it? Other teams are going to understand and realize, hey, these guys are desperate to get rid of stuff. Let's just give them whatever's in the junk closet. So that's my 2 cents, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Brian. And that is so. Last year, everyone wanted to trade so that a lot of these players could come up. Well, these players aren't, they're not as good as you thought that they were. And so now they're struggling and you're like, well, let's trade them too. And it's like, what? Okay. Like, but what do you do then? Like if you can't get anything for somebody in a trade, I mean, that's 101. You don't trade them for nothing. You don't trade them for nickels on the dollar. See if you can get them closer back to $1. See if Brady
But they're
Singer,
not going to be. Give me any reason to have hope that any of these players will get anywhere close to $1.
Mike Moustakas was in the same boat. He was batting 212, Tommy, in 2014, 212. And he was an all-star the next year. Guys can bloom late in Major League Baseball. These guys aren't 30, 31 years old that we've just seen it over and over and over and over and over again. We've seen it for like 2 years.
You know what this sounds like to me? This sounds like complacency. That's what it sounds like. Complacency. You know what? We don't have really any leverage. We got nowhere to go. We got nothing to do. Oh, we'll just hang on to them and cross our fingers and hope that maybe we'll win 70 games next year instead of 55. It's not going to happen. So,
the stock market's going poorly here. It's like the stock market's going poorly. Let's just get out now while it's down instead of waiting until it might come back up.
Might come back up, and it won't come back up. I mean, it just won't. Like with these guys, it's not going to. So I think you also need to know when you're hanging on to a stock that's a dog for too long and get out before it gets any worse.
Yeah, but you don't get to trade anything for a stock. You just get to take your licks. You can still trade something for these guys, which is my point. You can either trade them at little to no value right now, or trade them at little to no value 2 years from now, or maybe that value is increased. The value's not going to get worse. There's no risk because the value gets no worse. Like zero risk in hanging on to these guys because it's not going to get worse. But it might get better. You may not think it will. I don't know if I think it will, but it's not going to get worse. So why would you trade it at rock bottom?
Because now, okay, I get your point and I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it would be different for me if I felt like I had any faith whatsoever that any of these players' trade values would get better. I don't feel like any of them will because nobody's given me any indication that they have or that they will. You can throw out a Mike Moustakas example, which is one example, by the way, in the last decade.
It's just the first one that popped into my head. I have to try harder.
You can throw him out, as much as you want to, but that doesn't give me a lot of hope that, it happened with Mike Moustakas, so it's clearly going to happen with Nick Pratto and MJ Melendez and Kyle Isbell and Brady Singer.
You're misunderstanding. I'm not saying it's going to happen with anything. I'm saying there's a chance that it does, and the alternative is not worse. It's at worst the exact same, but it's not worse. The alternative isn't worse than this. So to me, what is the point?
I think it is, because you want to tell me that the Royals in free fall in 2023 is going to be worse than the Royals continuing a free fall in 2025 or 2026? What you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road for I don't know how many years and saying, you know what, let's just hang on and see if we can, get better value out of these guys to trade them away in 2 years or 3 years or whatever. And then we're 2 or 3 years further down the line of a rebuild not even happening. So I guess if you want to continue to kick the can down the road,
holding on to giving Alex Gordon that contract, holding on to Lorenzo Cain, not trading Eric Hosmer, that's kicking the can down the road. Not trading Scott Barlow, that's kicking the can down the road. Not trading somebody with 4.5 years of control whose value is as low as it will ever be is not the same thing as that. Those are two very different things. Not trading Salvador Perez might be kicking the can down the road. I'll give you that. Salvador Perez, like, you can make this case with me when you talk about Salvador Perez, but not about the young guys who don't have their max value, because I'm not sure Salvador Perez's value is going back up. This may be the most value you'll be able to get out of Salvador Perez, and he's an older player. I'm in on that. Okay. It's just not, it doesn't make any business sense to not, to get the least possible value intentionally out of players that you can get. They're not blocking anybody. There's nobody knocking on the door behind them. The problem for the Royals is the big league level sucks and the minor league level sucks. That's the issue. So if there's nothing better than those guys getting better, then you don't just do it because you feel like you have to do it. You still have to try and get the best that you can get, or this is going to continue for 6 more years.
So this is what I hear then. I hear, okay, Royals fans, let's hunker down, and it's going to be bad for a while because we're not going to do anything to try to move this forward. We're just going to hang on to everybody that we have because we have control over them, and we'll meet back up here in 3 or 4 years and see where it is.
If somebody doesn't offer you anything, if they offer you a pile of crap for your players, then yeah, don't take it, because what's the point? Why would you take that offer? It doesn't help you get better. If nothing in a trade for Brady Singer helps you get better, why would you make the trade? It's not going to make the trade. We got some comments on the video section that you can see. We'll try and put those up throughout the way here. It's fascinating. I don't think those young guys are getting traded. Maybe they do. I don't think they are. I think it becomes a question of Salvador Perez, and I think he'll go. I think it becomes a question of any of those other relievers. I do kind of think Carlos Hernandez probably has a little bit of trade value. And then Bobby Witt Jr., because Bobby Witt Jr. obviously is Bobby Witt Jr., but I still, for the same reason, think you wait there too, because I think his value is going to go up. Whether he's a part of your future or not, his value will certainly be, and you want to maximize the value if next year is not going to get any better anyway, and there's nobody on the planet that thinks it is. It is going to be an interesting month. I hate, like last year, Tommy, when they had some tradable assets, right? They had Michael A. Taylor was very tradable. Andrew Benintendi was very tradable. They had some tradable assets. They held on to Whit Merrifield. Whit Merrifield's another example of a kick the can down the road guy. But yeah, it's wild, man. It's there is interesting a team at the deadline with his least interesting amount of players maybe as there is outside of Oakland. There's not a lot there that gets you excited about what the return's going to be. We appreciate all the comments. You can continue to leave them. You can continue to chat it out with us on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll have that open for one more segment. We'll come back with more Sports Daily right after this.
The commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
Welcome back, everybody. Albrecht and Caster, Sports Daily. Tommy, no deal for the Pac-12. So much so that San Diego State now going back to the Mountain West. What in the world? I mean, this is I am legitimately concerned for the Pac-12.
Sure.
I think that the Big 12 is getting at least Colorado and Arizona because I don't know what the Pac-12 is banking on here. San Diego State clearly is so uneasy that they embarrassingly now have to crawl back to the Mountain West. Like the Pac-12, and when I say legitimately concerned, I want the Pac-12 to survive. Now, I want the Big 12 to get stronger, but I want the Pac-12 to be a league and a Power 5 league in this country. I'm worried about them.
Is anybody surprised by this? I mean, I feel like if there was going to be a media rights deal for the Pac-12, it would have already been announced. And this is a bait and switch. It's a situation where the Pac-12 is like promising their teams, yeah, just hang on, it's coming, we're going to get it done. And then it never gets done. I'm not surprised by this because I feel like the Pac-12 has been trying to pull the wool over the eyes of their members and just the public for a long time. And, you know, I do kind of feel bad for San Diego State, but at the same time, they did overplay their hand a little bit, you know, with everything that they did. I mean, they kind of bought it from the Pac-12 too, that, hey, we're going to be a part of this. And then it's like the emperor has no clothes, right? Like there's nothing there. When you look behind the curtain, the Pac-12 has nothing done. And I'm not sure they're going to get something done. If they do, I think it's going to pale in comparison to any of the other media deals that we've seen. And look at, by the way, ESPN and all their layoffs last week. I mean, they are in the business of like not spending money right now. They are trying to conserve as much money as they possibly can. So I can't see them coming to the table for anything of significance for the Pac-12.
When we were talking about the ESPN cuts, what did I send you back, Tommy, last week? The Pac-12 is screwed.
Yeah.
They've told their people apparently that there's accelerated progress, according to Ross Dellinger, on a new TV deal that includes like linear concept. But they're only now saying there may be some framework laid out by Media Days on July 21st.
God. Like just, you know, we talked about kicking the can down the road in the last segment. Ooh. That's all the Pac-12 is doing right now.
I guess they don't have a choice because they don't have a deal. That's the question is how long does Colorado, Arizona, how long do they hang on and keep?
And I don't have a problem necessarily with them not having a deal. I mean, it's not good for them, but whatever. They don't have a deal, but quit telling everybody they have one when they don't. Like they've been doing that for months now. They clearly don't have one. They haven't had one, and they're not going to get one. So stop telling people you have one.
Poor San Diego State. That sucks so hard for them. 869-1240. We'll come back. We'll wrap it up after this. All right, Odyssey and KYM bring you Concerts in the Park. It's free live music Friday, 8 to 10. This week it is Lucky People. Bring your lawn chairs, blankets, extra cash for the food trucks. No coolers allowed. Gates open at 6:30. Regular day of programming today before the Royals at 7. Tommy and I will be out tomorrow. Enjoy the 4th. Happy Independence Day, everybody. Let's celebrate it safely, hopefully, and we will be back with you Wednesday. For Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. See you then.